Is Killers of the Flower Moon overrated? Yeah, a little bit, but it's still a really good movie. It's the kind of movie I wanted out of The Irishman, and in my opinion, is Martin Scorsese's best movie since Silence. Speaking of Silence, that was really the issue I had with The Irishman, and the reason I didn't review it, because, well, I knew somebody was going to crucify me for what I'm about to say next, but for all the people who say that it's visual storytelling and cinematic art, how the fuck is 3.5 hours of inner monologue after inner monologue and 90% of the actual dialogue being exposition count as visual storytelling? That'd be like calling a Pirates sequel a silent movie. But while I was worried Killers of the Flower Moon would be the exact same, thankfully there is barely any narration whatsoever. This is a movie that trusts you to understand what's happening on screen, even if you've never heard of these murders, like most people have. Scorsese trusts you to watch the Osage practice different prayers, rituals, and spiritual omens, and understand what they all mean without spoon-feeding it to you. It can be seen with the sound off, and the audience could still understand most of what's going on. And Scorsese's so confident of that, several scenes are spoken in Negi Hasuan without subtitles. It's the actors' facial expressions and body language that tell us everything. But for me, Rodrigo Prieto's cinematography and Thelma Schoonmaker's editing, once again, is the reason this 200-minute movie never had a dull moment. Now, it's fair to say Leonardo DiCaprio gives similar performances in most of his films.
Trope number 1, he's always a smug and or insecure douche.
His pursed lips and or eye squint are always on display to prove that.
Trope number 2, ridiculous accent.
You look real pretty there. You remind me of my last girlfriend, Pawnee gal. Very nice. Then she turned 26 and everything changed.
It's actually natural compared to most of the other Southern accents I've heard in movies, especially when DiCaprio's the one doing them.
Trope number 3, screaming in that ridiculous accent.
Nowhere near as much as he usually does, thankfully.
Trope number 4.
Hey, that's my favorite prop.
Dressing up like an older man even though he looks 15.
Well, how's that supposed to make me feel?
Trope number 5, Martin Scorsese.
Trope number 6, Martin Scorsese.
Okay.
Trope number 7, trying his best to have you remember a performance by screaming, yelling, and crying all in the same scene.
Directed by Martin Scorsese.
Kinda goes without saying.
Again, kept to a minimum during the character's lowest points, so it still fits the character and the story. But all jokes aside, as far as DiCaprio performances go, this is one of his most nuanced, which I think is the reason people appreciate it so much, and I do too. I still think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is his best, but he still conveys the internal conflict of being more loyal to certain family members over others, and why he would do such things over and over again. However, as many people have pointed out, it's Robert De Niro who gives his best performance in years, maybe even a decade. Last Irishman comparison, I swear, but what people said about the mobsters in that being subtly chilling and quiet, this was what I wanted. He has a mean streak and could be loud if he needed to, but he never had a mustache twirling over the top moment. Even in private conversations, he never revels in the pain and misery he's causing people. If anything, what makes him such a menacing villain, one of the biggest scumbags De Niro has ever played in his career, is just how much he quietly justifies his atrocities as just a regular part of life. He's even fully accepted by Osage in the beginning and even speaks Negi Hasuan as flawless as they do. It really sells how calculating and manipulative a businessman he is. Nevertheless, he will hurt his own family without hesitation, without any remorse whatsoever, almost as if he literally believes that it's every man for himself. The only thing that bugged me about De Niro or DiCaprio is that sometimes they repeat the exact same sentence over and over again like they're Jacob Tutu, over and over again like they're Jacob Tutu. Needless to say, that got a little annoying, but nothing too distracting, and that's mostly in the second half of the movie. But like his most recent film, Scorsese has several side characters with the potential to be as engaging as the leads, but they're given such inconsistent screen time that so many big-name actors are just done dirty. I will say, John Lithgow is such a great actor that his best moment is when he's interrogating someone off-screen, but you can still sense the character's commitment in his voice. Tantoo Cardinal makes a huge lasting impression as Molly's mother with hardly any dialogue and actually had the most endearing moment in the film for me. Brendan Fraser, on the other hand, has one good moment as a scumbag lawyer, hitting just the right amount of loud, over-the-top screaming, but he disappears as soon as he's introduced. Ray Romano had more to do in The Irishman. Eldon Hansen from Daredevil, yes, Foggy is in this. He doesn't do a fucking thing, and he doesn't say a fucking word. I'm not even kidding. I had to look up that he apparently plays, I don't know, DiCaprio's brother, nephew, cousin? I'm not sure. I wouldn't have guessed with just the fact that he's a glorified background character in this. But, funny enough, and I think this is probably going to be the biggest hot take in this video, I think the actor who got screwed over the most is actually Lily Gladstone as Molly. So many reviews are saying that she's the emotional heart of the film, the best performance, she steals the show from bona fide Oscar-winning actors. What are you guys talking about? And don't get me wrong, she does a good job and definitely holds her own against these great actors. It's two things in the script that make it hard for me to care about the character of Molly Burkhart. The first one being, even though Gladstone does have chemistry with DiCaprio, what exactly these two characters see in each other, I have no idea. And it's an important thing to have an idea about because DiCaprio's technically betraying her constantly, even though he genuinely loves her. And you do believe that he's torn between loyalty to his wife and the uncle who raised him more like a father, so what should be a complex relationship was too confusing for me to get into. But the big issue for me is that she, in my opinion anyways, really doesn't do all that much. Obviously you expect her to grieve her tribe's losses, struggle with trusting Leo, desiring justice or revenge, and when they do focus on that, there's potential for her to be the engaging, likable character, but there are way too many drawn-out, repetitive scenes of her just sitting in bed moping, bedridden with illness, or fighting with Leo, and nothing else. The scenes of her actively seeking justice, like going to Washington, talking to the president, and pleading for help, things that make her interesting, a threat to De Niro, and a target, raising the stakes, are nowhere near focused enough. And I do think it's a disservice to Gladstone as an actress and the real-life Molly Burkhart's legacy. I was looking forward to seeing Jesse Plemons play a more sympathetic character than he's used to, and as the federal agent investigating, he does a good job expressing disappointment in his heinous suspects while still being professional to them, but the investigation is one of the shortest aspects of the film, and you don't really know that much about who he is and why he's actually listening to the Osage being sympathetic to them. And again, that's important. As much as everyone who watches this movie is just going to point out all the white people and all the crimes that they commit, you do have to point out that other white folks listening to the Osage is the reason that this event was ever investigated, let alone solved. And it also plays into the big problem with the story, and this may sound unfair to complain about, but hear me out. Even though there was never a dull moment, and any movie this long that can accomplish that did something right, there were so many predictable moments. Even though this technically isn't a mobster movie, it might as well be with how many times we see them plotting their crimes, luring and killing victims, or even getting caught and convicted in the vein of Goodfellas, Wolf of Wall Street, and countless others. There's so much time spent on criminals carrying out misdeeds and nowhere near enough development towards the investigators or, dare I say, the actual victims of the Osage murders. And you might say, well, what's wrong with that? Every director has their formulas. Guillermo del Toro himself said that directors often make the same movie over and over, which is absolutely true. There are formulas I'm spoiled of, and if the gangster formula of Scorsese movies is one you can watch over and over without getting bored, that's great. But no formula works for every audience, and I just don't think changing the setting, time period, or the race of certain characters makes it any less predictable. If anything, it takes away from the true history if you're constantly being reminded of other kind of sort of fictional or real-life events. You all know what I mean by that. If you're gonna have formulas, the characters themselves still need to be likable enough that you're happy they survived or sad that they died. Goodfellas took slimy murderers and found a way to make them just that. But with this, you admire the performances and some characters are intriguing, but they're not really likable. This is such brutal subject matter, and like I said, there's not as much hopeful moments of the Osage where the FBI seeking justice as there should be. If there were, I probably wouldn't even be talking about this. And anyone who's gonna say, well, isn't the fact that this is a real-life historical tragedy enough to feel sympathetic towards the people who are getting axed off? And the unfortunate fact is, No, because I know for a fact that I'm watching actors. I know for a fact that what's on screen isn't real and didn't 100% happen because it's a movie, it's historical fiction. I mean, do you honestly think the gangsters in Goodfellas were anywhere near as likable and sympathetic as they were in real life? No, you still need to create something about them where there's a moral conflict about rooting for someone you know for a fact is a scumbag, and as I'm recording this on first viewing, I don't really get that. Maybe my opinion towards Killers of the Flower Moon will change over time. I definitely want to see this a second time. But as far as first impressions go, this is still a really good movie. The cinematography, the direction, the performances, the musical score, the production and costume design, it's all top notch. It's really just the familiar aspects about it that weigh it down for me as of now. But that being said, even if you would rather watch this on streaming, go see it in the theater. I mean, Dad, so what if it's 3.5 hours? You spend like twice that much watching Law and Order every day, so maybe hit me up for a repeat viewing. I don't know.